Hello and welcome to Creator Toolbox. This is the show where we give you, the ServiceNow developer, admin, no-code developer, the tools that you need to build apps on the Now platform. We'll go ahead and get started with introductions. Chuck.
Hey, my name is Chuck Tomasi, Senior Developer Advocate at ServiceNow. Been here since 2010, doing all kinds of stuff with custom applications, implementations, integrations, and was a customer for a couple of years before that. We won't get into the dark ages of history before I was introduced to ServiceNow, but there's a lot of it, and we'll leave that for another story when we meet in person at a dev meetup or something.
Thanks, Chuck. And my name is Brad Tilton. I am a Senior Developer Advocate here at ServiceNow. I've been developing on the platform since 2008, kind of a similar story, except I have a consulting stint stuck in there. I specialize in custom apps and front-end development, automation, all of those sorts of things. And I'm excited about today's show because it's something that I haven't messed with a lot. And so I'm excited to learn about dynamic inputs in Flow Designer. So Chuck, you want to tell us a little bit more about what we're going to be doing today?
Yeah, absolutely, Brad. Thanks. I think I speak for most developers when I say most of us would rather be creating new things than maintaining old things. And this is one of those cases where you can significantly reduce your maintenance on some of those old things, specifically the Flow Designer Integration Hub actions that you create. Dynamic inputs are a way to get data from a remote system and then use it as the action inputs. It's kind of a two-step process. So you have two actions. One that's a helper that says, hey, go out and get a list of these projects, go out and get a list of these servers, whatever it is, and let somebody pick. Because if you didn't use that, you would be maintaining those lists either through a traditional integration and storing it in a table, doing a periodic update, or you'd have to, God forbid, manually enter those choices yourself and then try to keep them in sync with whatever that remote system is. Think of like a Jira integration, something that a lot of you may be familiar with, where you want to know what the projects are on that remote system. So as your flow designer, the person that's actually building the flow, drops that action out, they can either put an action, use one of those projects, or take a data pill or something to get that a little more dynamic. And that's why they're called dynamic inputs. A use case that we had here on Live Coding Happy Hour quite some time ago, but shortly after dynamic inputs came out, was Dave Slusher was creating an integration to Linode, one of our hosting providers that we use personally. I use them offline for my podcast and whatnot. But he wanted to provision a server, so he made an action and then made a dynamic input that said, what region do you have servers? Because one of the questions they ask through the web interface or through the REST API, yes, is what region do you want to put the server? Well, how do you know what servers are? There's another REST API to ask, where are my current servers? And it was really fun because he did this, I think it was 2018, maybe 2019, and built this action, put it on whatever it was, Artifact Manager or some application, and then came back a year later and they had added servers. There were like a couple new ones in India and Europe. And as soon as he used that action again, that list was already populated with the latest and greatest server location. So he had to do 0. It was like, that was so cool. Well, look at that. They added some servers and there they are. You don't even have to think about it because you're getting that information dynamically through a REST API. So that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to create 2 new dynamic inputs. We're going to create a dynamic choice, which is a simple drop-down list, and then a dynamic template where you can specify name value pairs for these fields that you may say, hey, what kind of inputs do you require for your REST API? And it can tell you, today I've got 3 fields, tomorrow I'll have 4 fields, but you don't need to worry about that because your dynamic input can keep up with that. So that's what I've got on the plan. I think that's pretty much all we've got before we jump into the demo. What do you say we do a quick screen share here? So play that crazy time machine music. And I'm going to start with the remote system that I've got. This is one of my instances. Now, this is currently a ServiceNow instance because it's very easy to, for me to configure an outbound REST or an inbound REST to say, here's But this could be anything. This could be another system. It could be a service that you use from the internet, something just to give it a little variability. Now, my use case that I'm going to be using today is for what I'm calling my smart home helper. It's a facilities-like app. And I want to know what smart devices are out there. And these are actually outlets and switches in my house from TP-Link. They use a service called Casa. So I created a REST API, and periodically I go out and say, well, what devices do I have today? Because through time, you move an outlet or you switch one, and it used to run the Christmas tree. Now it runs the bar. Things move around and you need to keep your database refreshed. Well, if this is a facilities app that interfaces with that, I want to be able to go out and say, what devices do I have so that somebody can choose them? So I want a dynamic choice to pick this. And this is a quick peek at the REST API Explorer on that remote system. I'm just going to show you kind of what happens when I say, I want to get that device list. There's no query parameters because it's a simple, give me the whole thing. So no filtering or anything. I send that out, and luckily I get a 200 OK. Otherwise, we'd be having a totally different discussion on this. Some of the header information, but I'm going to pass right by and look at the response body. And you can see here's the traditional ServiceNow result, and I've got a list object, which is an array of stuff. So I've got a bedroom fan. I know what the ID is. I can see it's a Wi-Fi smart switch, blah, 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 firmware, hardware, et cetera, et cetera. I'd like to put that into a drop-down list in my action so that it comes back properly. I'll show you what it actually does. This is my device list. Simple scripted REST API that goes out and queries some records and puts together a bundle of JSON object stuff. Nothing too terribly complex on the ServiceNow side. So giving you a peek behind the scenes. Let's then turn to our instance where we're going to build this. I've already built out the guts of this application, particularly the credential alias with the connection and the API keys and the user password, whatever it takes to connect to the system. So I don't want to spend a lot of time on there. I'll cover that in more detail on the integration series. It's scripted as of this point. I'll be recording it very, very soon. So look for that in the upcoming weeks and months that will have that. So first things first, we need to go to Flow Designer to create this. We're going to create some actions. Let me get the zoom control out of the way while Flow Designer takes its own sweet time to fire up, always during the live demos, right? And I'm just going to double check, make sure that I'm in the right scope. Smart home helper. Yep, that's it. I'm going to create a new action. I've got a bunch of actions out there, but none of them are for this particular application. So let's say create action. This is the helper action. It's going to call that REST API to get those series of devices. To make these actions a little easier to find, I like to preface them with dynamic. Otherwise, they kind of get mixed in with some of the other actions, and it's not exactly easy to find the dynamic action in amongst the other ones. So you use whatever nomenclature, dy dash, something that helps you with the naming. I'll show you where this comes in real valuable soon. So get device list. Sounds good to me. That's all it's going to do. This action's job is just to get some information and return it. And it has to be in a specific payload format. Let me show you the docs page on that, because we do have some nice documentation. This is sneak peek at Rome, but I think by the time most people see this, it'll be Rome time. There, and nothing has changed. So I think I'm safe harbor here. But the dynamic choice is down here. And I've got, what I'm aiming for is an object called data that has label name in it, an array of choices. You would think this would be like name value or label value, but it's not. So we're going to work with that, where this is the label that the human will read, and this is the value behind the scenes that we'll use. And it walks you through pretty much how to build this, which is what I'm going to do with my use case. So in Flow Designer, I've given it a name. We are going to submit that. It doesn't take any inputs, which is really nice, because all I'm saying is, go get me some stuff. All right. Again, you could add inputs if you wanted to filter or sort or do whatever you want with this. So I'm going to skip over the inputs and go right to my first action, which is going to be a REST action. And yes, dynamic inputs require an integration hub subscription. So feel free to use them on your PDI all you want. But when it comes to production, you're going to have that licensing discussion with somebody. So let's go down here to integrations, create a REST step. I'm going to use a connection alias because it's already been defined. It saves me all kinds of time. X underscore something something casa rest. That's the one. And it fills in the base URL for me. It already knows how to connect to this other system. I could use it for a number of integrations. In fact, I will be using it for a number of integrations. The resource path, if I remember my other page correctly, was just device under list. So let's put that into Flow Designer. You'll get a lot of this information out of whatever documentation your REST API is calling, if it's something better than my little demo here. It's a get. Don't forget to check the HTTP method. I can't tell you how many times I've been screwed up on that. There's no query parameters, but almost always I will put in the two headers content type, because I never like to assume what type that they're going to assume whatever I'm sending is JSON and what they will return. This is a little more explicit to say, I'm sending you JSON, I expect JSON. Sometimes if you forget these, you send out JSON, you get back XML and you're like, well, fine, but no. But by paying attention to a couple of headers, it's real easy. That's kind of it. I'm going to do a save just because it's time to save. I built something.
That's right.
Now, next step is a script step to turn it into that nice format. And I need an input variable for the response body. And that's going to come from right over here from my previous step. There it is. And I'm going to pull a baking show on you because this one's not real tough. It parses the input body. Let me zoom in on that so the mobile viewers can see it a little easier. This all comes in as text. So you gotta remember that you're in charge of the conversion factor here. Response body is just a big JSON string. So to turn it into something useful, I'm going to parse it into a body object, then drill down into body to get that list object that we saw in the REST API Explorer, start with an empty array of devices, and then iterate through that list one at a time. And I get the label from the name, and I get the name, which is technically our value, from the hardware ID. You figure it out. You know, this isn't rocket science when it comes to JavaScript. When I get each object created, I push it into the devs array. And then here's important point number one. Remember our data object from the documentation back here? Where is it? Where is it? Where is it? Here. We are aiming for this kind of thing. So my array is built. I called it devs. I'm going to pop it into that data property. So a couple of things you need to be aware of. That's one of them. And I'm going to point out the others real soon. We need to dump this out. The script, I'll say this slowly and I'll say it again later. The script output can be called anything you like. And it must be a format JSON. So the label, devices, and JSON. Important stuff. That's the important, right here is the most important. JSON. You can call the rest whatever you want. The action output, and I missed this the first time around. It was very frustrating. The action output must be named. I can call it, I can label it anything I want. Must be named output, not outputs, not devices. And it is right here in the documentation that I cleverly missed. In the action outline, click outputs and create an output named output of type JSON. I just about, it's one of those, you missed it and you frustrated at yourself for wasting an hour on something so simple. Don't be me in that case. Let's save that.
So Chuck, all of these things, so it has to be named output. This is so that it works with the dynamic inputs that we're going to create.
Yes.
Okay.
The dynamic inputs are looking specifically for an object, a JSON object named output. Again, you can label it whatever you like. So let's go ahead and test that. We saved it. Therefore, we test. And what I should get, this is the scary part when it comes to demos. As long as that script was pretty happy, I have no output data. Oh, guess what I forgot to do again? This should be a drinking game for us, Brad. I didn't return. Yeah, you see it. Script step devices. Forgot to put the script output into the action output.
That's just part of our development process at this point. Test it, realize you don't have any outputs, and then go back and add the output.
I swear someone's gonna make some kind of bot on the Slack channel for that one sooner or later. All right, run it again. And I still don't have a runtime value. Uh-oh. Let's go ahead and check the steps. Did my step have an output? So here's my response body. Yeah, that looks pretty good. I'll beautify it in a minute. And I don't have a device output. Oh, let's go take a closer look not in Studio, sorry. Studio won't let you look at the action. We parsed the response body. We got the output. Oh, it's called devs. Shame on me. Here, I know how to fix that. Save. It's always that connective tissue between the script and the output, script output and the script output and the action output. That's where we get caught up more times than any. One more time. You think there'd be some way to go, these don't match. Didn't we suggest that once before?
I think we did.
Like,
we have all sorts of good ideas.
Put a sanity checker in there that says your script doesn't have an output named whatever you named your output, or your output, you don't have any outputs defined. Is that correct? I mean, Outlook will even tell you you used the words attached, but you didn't attach anything.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is our output, and it looks okay to me, but I'm going to use a JSON beautifier to clean that up. And hey, look at that. It looks pretty close to what we were aiming for, if not exactly what we were aiming for. So what good is that? Well, that's step one, is to create this little helper action. Now that we're done, we'll close the context and publish. Publish, publish, publish.
So those were all your Casa devices?
Those are my switches and outlets in my house. I don't think they
Nice.
were sorted in any particular order, but
It didn't look like it.
that's up to the other side. And I, frankly, for this demo, don't care. Let's go and create the actual action that's going to consume those and how it's presented to the user. So let's go to action and call this I don't know, Casa device. You'd think I'd have this scripted better, but I don't. This one requires an input. Obviously, we're using dynamic inputs. This is where the magic sauce happens. Okay, so we're going to call this device, and it is going to be a dynamic choice. See, we have giant choice and template. I'll do the template in a minute. I told you about that. So we are using a dynamic choice because that's what the doc said. And down here on the bottom, we have our dynamic options. Pick your action. Okay, now you know I put the word dynamic in there because this list could get very, 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 very long. But by searching for dynamic, or here's another one, put dynamic in the suffix. There's my dynamic list. Just like other ones, I could put a default value in there. I could put other stuff. Let's make it mandatory. So you can't proceed, do not pass go. And what do I want to do with that? Let's go ahead and just log something. I'm not in a creative mood today. So we'll just log and say, here is the device you got. Drag that over, save. And when somebody instantiates this on a flow or a subflow, what they're going to see is a pull down. Now, if you notice the little spinny thing there it ran, it just did the REST API for that helper. The first script just ran, and it went out to my instance, says, give me that list, and created, woohoo, I guess this is sorted alphabetically. Thank you, former sober self. And I'll say I want to pick the studio mixer. And when I run that, it goes, great. Let's check the execution details. And my steps should have a log in here that says, here is the device chosen with the output value, or the name, not the label, but they put the name in there. So that's what's being consumed by the rest of the action, or it could be from the flow or the subflow. I'm not actually going to go and build a subflow and put this, well, I'll show you how that, you guys know how this is done, right? Oops, I kind of wanted to do the other way, but let's do subflow. And we'll just pick some action. And I should have a smart home something here, smart home helper. Now I can pick my dynamic action here. I don't know why, but you could. But here's my Casa device. And of course, it's already checked it. And I believe it caches this for a little while, so you're not constantly hitting the REST API as you're building. So it knows this list, and there's some time to live. I don't know, hour, a day, something like that. But what I found is and I'll show you this in the next one, if you need that list refreshed, there's a way to force it. So that is a dynamic input. Again, if I were doing this to, say, Linode, and I wanted to get a list of servers, I could write that helper script, say, where are your servers? As long as it fits this data format and it's in that JSON object, you can use it. So the second type I wanted to create, I don't know why I have Studio up on that instance. We haven't used it yet. Let's kill this. And we'll build a dynamic, what was it called? Dynamic content? Dynamic. We had a dynamic choice. I'm scrolling through my notes to make sure I didn't miss anything. Dynamic fields? No, I can't remember. Shame on me. I had this at the tip of my tongue a second ago. The dynamic template. Sorry, too many things going in my brain today. Dynamic template allows us to ask for a certain number of fields. You may have seen this because there's a couple of out-of-box ones on ServiceNow where you specify a table and it says, okay, here are the fields you get to use on this table. Well, we're going to do something similar because over on my other instance, you saw I had device list. I've got another one that's called device fields. So if I want information about one of those particular devices, I can send that over and say, what does the structure look like? And I'll admit, I kind of cheated on this scripted REST API and returned something very, very close to what we need for the dynamic template output. So instead of just label name, label name, label name, you can also do choices. And any of these you could put a value in to specify a default value. And then if the type is choice, you drop in your choices with another array of label, get this, label value, label value, label value. So normally the fields or the choices on the other one are label name, but the choices under a choice type are label value. Yes, that too is documented. If you look at the dynamic template, getting started, creating a gathering data template, and this is what we're aiming for. which is why I sort of cheated on my scripted REST API and returned that. So this is going to be much quicker, but it really closely related, follows pretty much the same steps. So for a dynamic template, I'm going to create a new action. First, we got to do that little helper.
And if you hadn't cheated, you could just do the same thing that we did previously and use a script step to take the old data. And
exactly. I'll still be writing a script step, but I don't have to do quite as much manipulation to the data. So get device fields. And we're going to start it the same way. Again, no inputs, because all it's doing is reaching out and saying, hey, what's that look like? So there's my REST step. Same alias as before. Same base URL. This time it's device list. If my 30-second memory is worth anything, device fields. Device list was the other one. Oh, man, I got to talk to the doctor about this memory thing. And again, I'm going to put in the headers, content type, application JSON. Brad's watching to make sure I don't make any stupid typos, right? Accept and script. Basically the same two steps. Again, response body. The input variable will be my response body from the REST step. And cooking show this one, device fields. Much shorter. This time I'm just going to parse the response body, and I know the fields are already in there, so I'm just going to pop those into data this time. Less massaging because I, sort of cheated before, but you may not get such good clean data. Then we'll try not to forget this again. This one's going to be fields of type JSON. Don't forget, make it the right data type. And let's see if we can avoid the drinking game this time. This one is fields output, again, underscored, big, red, bold, whatever you want to do to remember that one. JSON, exit, edit mode, and put the fields object there. I did make that JSON, right? Yeah, I did.
Yep.
Okay, good. Save it. Now this one's fun to test too. Not only do you just get the drop down, but if everything works right, we test it. See if we get the right output object this time. Look at those results. And woohoo, I have output fields and I can't read those very well. So we are going to beautify that again. I really want one of those JSON beautifiers in the platform right there. We can do that. We have the technology. Name, label, name, label. Notice they don't have to be label name. I reversed these for whatever reason. Name, label, type, choice. Here's my choices of label value, label value, label value. And this one also has a value on it. So it defaults to pending, which should be what I see when I pull up that choice list. Where were we? We were on Flow Designer. So this thing feels validated to me. Let's go ahead and publish. And then I'm going to pull a fast one on you. I'm going to add another field in here. We've got the helper. Let's go and use it on a new action. So an actual action, Casa device fields. Again, unimaginative today. Our input, fields, dynamic template. And it says, which one would you like to use? Well, I don't want my dynamic device list. So let's get dynamic device fields. Save that. And again, I'm going to take the shortcut and go to log because there's something interesting I want to show you. Device fields and pop in the input fields. I didn't realize I could drill in deeper into that. What does that give me? Nothing. Okay, you can't drill in deeper. Why is that chevron there? Save that. And when I test it, it does the circle circle thing. It says, what would you like to add? I said, well, I've got alias. That's nice. We'll call this Chuck. And the device name is Chuck's outlet. And state, remember state was a choice. Oh, it didn't default to pending. That's interesting. I would have expected to see like something in there. So think about if you are creating a record on a remote system, you would want to know what fields they require to be able to create that record, or maybe any optional fields. So this is handy. And when I look at that log statement in here, I'm going to ask Brad, what do you think is in there? Oops, it kind of shows it. It's an encoded query string.
Oh, I don't know that I would have guessed encoded query.
Which you'd
Makes
have to
sense.
be really, yeah, you kind of got to be crafty to know what you're doing. It kind of does make sense because we know in ServiceNow, you can populate a record with an encoded query string with a sysparm query. There's a little side note if you didn't know that. But
You
if
can do
you've
all
actually,
sorts of stuff with it, you've got glide record, UI builder uses a lot of encoded query stuff. We use it all over the platform.
yeah, so that's a just interesting little tidbit. I wouldn't have expected that first. I would have,
Yeah,
I don't know what I would have expected, but it makes sense. So
maybe like an array.
and yeah, an array of objects would have been interesting. So the other thing I wanted to show is what happens when the other side says, hey, I'm changing this. And you can see there's alias, device name, and state. If I later decide to uncomment these, and I rarely use this box, so it's kind of fun. I don't use the comment very often. And I say, great, now we should be able to get a fourth field in there. So we go back here and we'll test it again. We say, hit the test button. And you go, okay, there's only 3, Chuck. What do I need to do to kick that into gear? I forget if it was the refresh or the big refresh on a browser. So let's look. I just did a little refresh. Test, there's the circle. And there's my device ID field that I didn't have before. So that's kind of handy.
Yeah, generally with Flow Designer, it loads everything when you load the page, right?
It
And
does.
so
Yeah.
there's a lot cached. So anytime you don't see anything, you don't see
Refresh.
something you think you should see, just refresh your browser and it probably shows up.
Do we have any questions,
Save first.
Brad?
What?
Do we have any questions?
No, the chat has been pretty tame this morning. I think everyone is just in awe of dynamic inputs, it looks like.
Or explained them so clearly, nobody has anything to ask. That rarely happens.
So do we have any questions, chat, if you're still around?
Well, they're thinking, I'm going to give them the summary of what we did. So dynamic inputs are nice because you are not responsible for maintaining those choice lists or field lists. They come from another system. There's like a pre-step for every one of these actions that goes, hey, fetch me the latest. And that's really handy when you're building out flows and the drop downs and whatnot are dynamic. You don't have to do any other integration. For example, nightly, we're going to go get this information and store it in a table. If it's only used for the flow inputs, that's kind of a waste. Also kind of harder to go retrieve and do. So, I mean, yeah, it could be, I guess. It wouldn't necessarily have to be a REST. You can get dynamic inputs, say, from your own instance, but instead of a REST and a script, it would be a glide record query that goes and gets a table and gets some stuff. So yeah, you could retrieve it if it's already local. And if you have a use for that information from a remote system other than the inputs, then it might also make sense to get it and store it and then do your dynamic input that way. So a couple of different ways you could slice it, but I just showed you how to go get it from a remote system. Don't forget, it is a kind of a 2-pass approach, as I mentioned. Pass 1 is go get me the list of switches and outlets. Go get me those smart devices. Pass two, I guess I could stop screen sharing if there's no questions that have questions about the actual implementation. Pass one is go give me the list of devices. Go give me the list of fields. Pass two is show them in this action. Use them as a dynamic input. Check my notes. Anything else that I forgot?
We've also got, can you use a reference field as a dynamic input? You know, we showed choice and string. Do we have other field type options there?
No, that one's interesting because what are you referencing? You only have visibility to that specific table and its values. If you wanted to return it, it would have to be in that choice value. It'd be represented as a choice. So don't use this on reference tables where you've got a list of 2,000 users to pick from. Okay, that would be a whole different use case. And dynamic inputs would, you really got to think about what am I getting and what am I retrieving and how is it represented here? How representing a reference field would be difficult. So I had the same question. I looked through the docs and did not see anything. Doesn't mean it's not on the horizon, not on the roadmap, but I haven't heard of anything at this point. If you feel that would be valuable and you've got some ideas of how that should be visualized or the use case for that, you know where to go. Go over to the community on the idea portal, put it in there and tell all your friends to upvote it.
And then we have another question. Can we replace the REST API integration with Jira with this? I think the answer is probably maybe. I don't know enough about the REST API integration with Jira.
I don't either, but if you've got a way to just get the raw information, if there's already an API that does what you need, yeah, you don't need to build the REST step. But as far as I know, you access Jira through existing actions and not steps. So the Jira action that says, go get me a list of projects is going to simply retrieve you a list of projects like, go give me all the YouTube videos. It's not going to be in that data object format that we saw in the docs. So you got a little bit of a puzzler there. Again, I won't say it's not the right approach, but it doesn't feel like it to me because we normally access the Jira APIs via actions.
Yeah, we did have a question about use cases. That it feels like this is really useful, especially if you are building some sort of integration where you want to make it available to other people, right? So then those other people don't need to know the data that well because you're giving them these dynamic inputs. So, may not be as useful if you're a one developer shop and you're always, although it probably still is useful, but I think it's especially useful when you're opening up, IntegrationHub to, maybe even no code, low code users where they can consume some of the actions and subflows you've created.
Agreed. There's one other thing that I wanted to show. I forgot. I got to go back to screen share mode for this because it's something I discovered as I was doing this repeatedly. So we'll do the 3, 2, here we go. If you find that you ever need to delete any of these, okay, this is exactly what I did and had to go look where, did a little bit of spelunking. So I've got my actions, I've got my smart home helper, and I say, you know what, I'm going to do this demo again tomorrow. Or, I totally screwed up and I want to start over. Or I was in the wrong scope because that sometimes happens. If I do a show matching, and I am in the right scope right now, and I am waiting for show matching to do something. There we go. And I say, delete all of these. It is going to have a bit of a fit. It says, you sure? Yes. And you get these, come on, where are they? You get these 4 warnings. It did 2 of them, but it couldn't do the dynamic piece of it. It took care of those top level ones that consume these, but it says, not going to do it for you. And I went, okay, it's time to do a little looking through the system. And what I found is I don't think it's actually on here. No, it's not. There is a file called sys. I'll blow this up so you can see it with me. Come on. Sys hub, which is a lot of the tables around Flow Designer and Integration Hub. Action under input, under instance. Okay, SysHub action input instance. That's where it says, who is using this? Oh, and it says you typed it wrong. I know it was in there. Action input action instance. SysHub action input. It sounds redundant, but it's actually a action instance. Okay, that's a lovely table name. SysHub action input action instance. And I had two dots in there. You saw that right as I hit enter. Boogers. Okay, no, that should be an underscore. There we are. So you've got this field. I usually sort by latest created, which you may have to add to your list, but there's my dynamics and it goes, look, you're using this and you're using this. And I say, fine, let's just take those 4 out. Oops, I got 5. 5 is right out. Once you delete those, they're sort of like reminders or hooks or some setting that says, this is who's using it and where, but it doesn't get cleaned up by that cascade delete. And if I go back to Flow Designer and get rid of those, because I don't like looking at red messages, now I can delete them. So just a little FYI that you can't delete those little helper functions, those little helper actions for the dynamic choice and the dynamic template. Even if they're not being used by anybody, they're still recorded in that other table and you'll need to delete those. The other thing I ran into is if you're testing an object, you're using the dynamic action and it says, cannot find data object, check the dynamic action outputs and ensure that it's called output. It is the most confusing message, but that's the one that screwed me up originally. It's like, can I find data object? And I looked in my script, it was making a data object, but the action output was not called output. And hence, if it's looking for that hard-coded name output, and it doesn't find a data object, that's how it says, I don't have a data object. You should be saying, I don't have an output. So that is just a couple of FYIs I wanted to tell you that I learned the hard way and wanted to share. So any final questions, comments, announcements?
Yeah, I don't think we have any more questions. We should put that error message in the show notes, I think.
Yes, I'll take care of that.
So no more questions. We have some announcements. There's a blog post on the developer blog about Rome season approaching. So we're just a couple of days away from Rome season starting. And we are going to have all sorts of content. It's going to last about a couple of months about all sorts of developer focused features from the platform that are in the Rome release. So we'll go through all sorts of, what's new with source control and Flow Designer and Integration Hub and UI Builder and all the things that developers use. And then towards the end, we'll have some things that are going to be released through the store rather than through the feature release that we'll go through those as well. But stay tuned, subscribe to the YouTube channel, subscribe to the blog, and check back. We'll have Breakpoint podcasts coming out. There's going to be a Tech Now next week that you should absolutely register for. And I bet Chuck knows the link to it off the top of his head.
Absolutely. I try to make these easy for me, just so when I get in these situations. devlink.sn/TN88REG, TechNow 88 Reg. That's TN 88 Reg. devlink.sn/TN88 Reg is where you go. You'll get there, sign up, you'll get the email with the URL when it's time to go. Want to see every one of you on that, asking questions. We have a ton of stuff. That's going to be our overview. Okay, so we're going to set the stage and then follow on creator toolboxes, follow on breakpoints, follow on blogs are all going to bounce off of that. If for some reason you miss it or your question doesn't get asked or you think of something afterwards, we will be using this information, this deck in future developer meetups. A lot of developer meetups in Q3 are looking at, hey, tell us about Rome. And as this goes, what I found, voice of experience here, I think I speak for Brad as well, correct me if I'm wrong, But what we find is we do this presentation like right on the leading edge of the release, this early access stuff. But as we go through some of the creator toolboxes, as we talk to the product managers, we learn new things. We learn a different vision. We get experience from you, the developers, going, look what I can do, or look what I found. And we incorporate that into the developer meetups. So I like the ones that come later, but we got to do this first one on the 27th. So 8 a.m. Pacific time, Tech Now is there. Thursday, excuse me, this week's breakpoint, because it's every other week. This week is supposed to be tomorrow on Wednesday, the 21st. We are deferring it one day so that I can get that discussion with Adam Stout in on time, like right on release schedule. So if you don't see a breakpoint in your inbox or in your podcatching client or wherever you get this on Wednesday, the 21st, don't freak out. I know you've probably got it on your calendar that says it's breakpoint day. Breakpoint day is a day late, simply so we don't have to wait 13 more days to have that conversation. I want to have the latest, hottest, greatest news, and it is a fun discussion with Adam. So I'm looking forward to sharing that with you.
All right. Well, thanks, Chuck. Thanks for everybody for joining us. And we will see you again on Thursday afternoon, US time, for a special Rome themed live coding happy hour.
Take care, everybody. Stay safe.
Thanks,
See you
everybody.
soon.